Hey, welcome back everyone to the Progressive Podcast. This is episode 75. Please hit the like button as you come in, share the video if possible, and hit the notification bell so you get all the updates from the Progressive Podcast. I'm here with my co-host, Renaissance Man.
Hey, welcome back everyone. Please like the video.
Also, make sure you follow us on Twitter at brothers_podcast. So, today's topic is AOC and Tulsi Gabbard and the meaning of progressive within the political left. We'll start with AOC. There was a separate bill initiated to fund the Israeli Iron Dome system that protects Israel from a surface-to-air missile standpoint. And initially, they wanted to fund it at a few $1 billion, and then it was negotiated down to $1 billion. They tried to put it into the COVID relief bill, and that didn't go. Now it's all about having a separate bill that actually is allocated resource-wise for Israel's security, quote unquote. Several of your progressive members of Congress voted it down, voted nay. However, you had one particular progressive person on the left named AOC who voted present. Initially, she voted nay. Now she votes present. At the end, there was a bit of a kerfuffle between Nancy Pelosi and AOC herself, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. And the question is, what happened in between her voting no, having the conversation with Nancy Pelosi, and then voting present, and what does that mean for her track record?
It's an interesting dynamic because she initially voted no, like you said, and the thing that I found interesting was then she voted present. To me, sort of. So I also almost wonder if like she's being groomed, not necessarily obviously for like speaker or anything, but like to have like a greater position in the party, just because, you know, Dems had the vote. Whether she votes yes or no is irrelevant from a passing the bill standpoint. So to me, that says more about the optics and the symbols. So I wonder if that could be part of it. If it's more of a, hey, if you vote no, you know, this is gonna hurt, you know, future prospects just because of the greater political implications. Or I also wonder if it may not even be that. It could just be, you know, she's such a, you could argue Nancy Pelosi, you know, Jim Clyburn, her, and you know, a few other people, Hakeem Jeffries, you know, Cory Booker, you know, those are very much people who are very high profile. I mean, she's definitely the most high profile, you know, younger congressperson, you know, under 40. I'd say probably on both sides, really. So I also wonder if it was just maybe just an optics type of thing of, you know, showing more solidarity as far as, hey, we don't want to appear, you know, anti-Israeli or anti-Semitic. So, you know, a present vote is not a no, which, I mean, it's not a yes either, but it's not sending that message of, hey, we're against it, you know, because when you say, hey, I abstain or I vote present, you know, there can be all sorts of things that you can sort of caveat it with of, you know, hey, I didn't agree how the bill was passed, or I didn't agree with something else in the bill, you know. That sort of gives you an out versus just an outright no vote.
Yeah, and see, because she's such a political firebrand, it's hard for her to walk away from this, because Jamal Bowman actually voted yay for the funding of the Iron Dome to the tune of $1 billion. He doesn't get the blowback because he's not a firebrand. Also because he outright voted yay. With the vote of present, that doesn't make a whole lot of sense if it went from no to present. There's no real explanation in intricate detail to explain, to kind of give a justification as to why you supported this in the first place, right? Because you were against it at first, and just last week she was wearing this tax the rich dress, but then when it comes to the actual funding of a functional bill that she should be against, she's not really functional there, right? And so she kind of looks like a walking contradiction, so to speak. And I really feel bad for her, mostly because she's so publicly visible to her supporters, and the people who on the ground who actually support her would be against her actually supporting this, right? But we don't really know if she actually supported just because it says present, but her vote is enough to tip the scales. It's not an active protest vote. Not like Cori Bush, Ayanna Pressley, Rashida Tlaib, Ilhan Omar, right? They all voted nay. that was just outright. We're not even going to get into all of that, right? So they stood their ground, but she did not stand her ground. And the question is, why didn't you stand your ground? What were you going to lose by not voting nay?
Yeah, the other thing is, I wonder if there's some sort of, I wouldn't say a deal was cut, but more of trying to preserve relations between the two caucuses, because one thing I know just from looking at the news today, another big fight amongst Dems and amongst progressives and sort of moderate Dems is the infrastructure packages. What they're calling like the sort of the human infrastructure. People like AOC, Cory Booker, they're asking for 3.5 trillion. Moderates are pushing back on that number, saying it's way too much, and progressives are sort of saying, hey, we're going to hold up a vote on the normal $1 trillion infrastructure bill until there's an agreement on the human infrastructure bill. So they're basically saying, hey, we want these to have agreement together, get passed together while we have some leverage. So part of me also wonders if that's part of what's going on here. If AOC is sort of, her and Nancy Pelosi are going to be working together, I'm sure on, and with Biden as well too, on those bills, as well as any other things that come up in the future. And that's just a matter of, hey, that was one of the things that she wanted her support on. Because, like I said, to me, it doesn't make sense other than, like I said, sending a message for you having a problem with her voting no. And like I said, unless, like I said, you're trying to protect a brand or worried about, funding or accusation accusations, or just control over the caucus in general too. It could have been a power play by Nancy Pelosi to sort of, reassure other people that, hey, the left hasn't gotten too out of hand. There's still an adult in the room. You know what I mean?
Yeah, to let them know who's the establishment, still in control. I agree with you on that. I do think that, this could, because they're all up for re-election. Especially, this is especially true for AOC because she will be the incumbent, and so whoever's running against her, which I think is another Latina who's actually running against her, she can be a threat because in the same way they funded Chantel Brown behind the scenes, you could potentially see a lot of money get behind her opponent, to put pressure on her, during her election cycle. So who knows how far down the rabbit hole this can go for her, because all this talk about being progressive, all this talk about, supporting Palestine and, people who are oppressed and whatnot, you just supported them at a tune of $1 billion. I don't know. And the one opportunity that you could take to say nay, you just did not, right? You didn't follow through with it. Your protest is only as good as wearing a dress. We really don't need that. And that could really, really, really hurt her. So I don't know. I just think that she's a good spokesperson for progressives, but she's not the actual progressive. And it all comes down to, for me, it all comes down to, action speaks louder than words, and on the ground, she doesn't really seem to be all that effective. Although she did support Texas during the disaster, right? She was able to raise millions of dollars, for aid and relief. And she did take Puerto Rico's side of independence over being becoming a 51st state, right? And so in some areas she's effective, but in this really critical area, she just was not effective.
Yeah, the thing I think that's unfortunate for her too is she's going to be up for re-election in a midterm type of period. So, if it was a presidential cycle, if that's how her seat worked, I think I think there'd be less concern because you have higher turnout in presidential elections. But if you're a congressman who's in that off midterms cycle type of election, it just you have to worry about the establishment coming after you and then your people not showing up. So I think that gives you, a lot of leverage to the establishment to really say, hey, we have money and we can put someone behind, like I said, sort of primary you, and we'll have money versus you may have a harder time raising money in a midterm or just getting your people out, sort of like what happened with Nina Turner in that regard. So I think that's sort of one of those areas where that's sort of the leverage that the establishment uses against the progressives to sort of get them to sort of bow and get in line with the agenda.
Yeah, absolutely. Because keep in mind that Cori Bush ran in 2018 and she lost, and then she came back in 2020 and tore the incumbent out the frame, so to speak, right? And so anything is possible in this scenario with AOC. There's a lot of time between now and election season for her. 9 months. So what other factors are going to come in after this? Because this is going to be one they're going to hang over her head for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. I personally, like I said, that will be one. I still hope she wins a re-election. She does. Like I said, she does have some issues. This will hang over, but she has been someone I think who has come in and really shaken some things up. Been willing to challenge the establishment like fewer freshman congressmen would, and to me that should be applauded. Obviously, votes like this are disappointing, but it's rare that you get purists, unfortunately, in Washington D.C. And like I said, they've done what a lot of freshman congressmen haven't been able to do, which is actually be known.
Yeah, definitely. So wait to see. Let's talk about Tulsi Gabbard. Now, Tulsi Gabbard kind of fell off after the presidential election, from a Democratic standpoint, and she has, basically left Congress as a representative for Hawaii, and she's no longer in politics. So, what to do? She seems to appear a lot on Fox News. Mainstream media, from a leftist standpoint, does not have her on any of the talk shows, from what I can see. She's not on Morning Joe. She's not on AM with Joy. She's not on any of the mainstream at all. She's kind of been pushed to the fringe of media, social media for that matter. She has a YouTube channel she posts on every week or so, but they're usually short clips, about 30 to 40 seconds. And so she was supposed to be this outlier within the Democratic Party who was not the establishment, right? She's military, National Guard for active duty, National Guard for Hawaii, and she's supposed to be this progressive. She was supposed to be a progressive. She has taken positions that were pretty progressive. She torpedoed Kamala Harris's campaign during the election, during the primaries. Well, I should say during the primaries, but during the during the debates, and Kamala never recovered from that, ever. And she was this rising star with that one punchline, very sharp, very matter of fact and confident, about what she thinks and how she sees politics from a leftist standpoint. But then post the and she also came out and defended Bernie Sanders against Elizabeth Warren, who accused him of, tried to have Me Too Bernie Sanders, and that blew up in her face. Because Tulsi came out, quick timing, really accurate, straight to the point that, Bernie has treated me really good, all this time. She's really been on point throughout the campaigns trail. But now, post-campaign, it's like, she supports the bombing of, Afghanistan with the drone strikes. She supports, deportation of, I guess, she supports, Guantanamo Bay. She's really all over the place with some of her ideas, and I would say that she's fundamentally more along the lines now of a neocon, so to speak. She supports all of the military engagement abroad, but then prior to that, she did not support it because she was in the military. She said she saw what soldiers look like when they returned, and so she didn't support it. Now she supports, this sort of engagement, from a drone standpoint, from attacking the Taliban or not the Taliban, ISIS, and all these other things that really the country is kind of moving back from, but not going forward with. And I don't know where she's going with her ideas at this point.
Yeah, and you also have to remember she also got into a spat in 2016 with the Clinton campaign. They had a pretty nasty back and forth with I think ultimately she ultimately dropped it, but I think she filed a defamation suit just because Clinton basically called her the candidate of the Russians. So she has this reputation of it seems like really coming at least into a primary and sort of stirring things up, but now seeing her sort of making this deal with Rumble and some of the positions, I hate to say it, but you almost have to wonder like how was there some truth to that? Was she sort of this person who was just sort of there to sort of rabble rouse and really was not that independent and almost like a plant? Or is this just evolution? That's something that just naturally occurred after she's gotten out of politics? Or basically was it a front her position the whole time? Or is she just one of these politicians who will go whichever way the wind blows in order to keep money coming in and keep a high profile? It is kind of crazy to hear, because I was having a discussion with some people the other day, talking about Dems that could run in 2024, and but before this news broke, people were talking and mentioning her as someone she did really well, like I said, with Kamala's campaign, with Torpedo and that, as well as they liked some of her positions and really just going at the Democratic establishment, but with her, signing on to this, I think that makes that less and less of a possibility. Obviously, unless it's, you're truly talking about a true third-party independent type of run. And I mean, those seem to go nowhere in America. The two-party system just seems to have to grip on the political system.
Yeah, I think I think when she dropped out, she was kind of tapped out of money, but she campaigned in areas that I thought that New Hampshire was like a really strong battleground for her, right? Because that's, that can determine. You kind of get a tepid feel for the moderates, right? Because New Hampshire is a live free or die. They're more along the lines of libertarian than they are of hardcore conservative, right? But if they had to choose a side between left and right, it would be the right. And so she kept campaigning up there, but she was actually securing a strong base. And I think she got the message that this is kind of where they want to go with her profile and her target points. I do think that the military-industrial complex is behind her, which is why she's kind of taking this position. And the third part for me would be that she's never going to get the support on the left that she needs to galvanize a base, because they're blocking her. She doesn't have any access to the mainstream. And so what is the alternative to all of this? And the alternative would be to kind of pander to those dissatisfied liberals, as well as those Trumpers who were dissatisfied with Trump himself and kind of moved away from him, and kind of, the people who voted for Joe Jurgensen would vote for Tulsi Gabbard. The people who voted for Bernie Sanders and were dissatisfied with what he did will probably sway over to her as well, because they did have some kind of distant, symbolic sort of Twitter relationship where she kind of jumps out there, she backs him up, and then no one ever really said anything bad about her during the campaign trail. But she torpedoed Kamala's campaign, so she has credibility in that area of the dissatisfied left and the dissatisfied right, and build that sort of moderate base outward. But I think she's making a big mistake by ignoring the progressives.
I think that as well too. I was having a discussion that to me, if you really want to turn people out and get people excited, if you're on the left or even in the center, and maybe even center left or center in general, I think you're going to have to excite. I think exciting the left, I think, will turn people out, and then I think people on the right, or who maybe not even be as far to the left, I think when some of these policies actually hit, I think they will see the benefits of it as well, and that retroactively you may even get a boost in that as well. So I think it's, like you said, I think it's definitely a misstep to discount the left and make sure you don't leave them out in that sense. The other thing I think you pointed out that's really telling is being basically frozen out by the media. At this point, sort of with the position she's taken, the people she's attached, it's almost like she really, the only lane that is available to her is that sort of alternative news or alternative source, because Rumble's kind of an alternative to YouTube that not as hard on censoring people. So it's almost like that may be her only path, which is sort of the outbursts and positions she's taken in the past two election cycles. And maybe that was her goal to begin with, was to sort of break into that alternative type of lane. But I just think, like you said, with positions she's taken and her signing this deal, that you'll definitely be sort of frozen out of mainstream media in that regard, because something like Rumble is going to be something that's going to be considered sort of hostile to the traditional media outlets.
We also got the one of the bills she proposed before she left office was about the Olympics, allowing trans people to compete in women's portion of the events. She proposed a bill that basically would strike that, prevent that from happening. And so I think she's playing into those moderate Democrats and a little bit of that mid to far right perspective on the ground. That she's on the left, but she's not for that, right? And then you have the people on the left who are the actual liberals, right? That they support $15 minimum wage, but they don't support that other stuff, right? And so she's galvanizing that sort of those sort of dissatisfied voters. But I also think there's some other things progressively that she can get behind that would make a lot of sense. Renewable energies, Green Deal, those things, those sort of things, those sort of big ideas. She can actually get behind some of those ideas, and you don't have to get 100% of that base, but you gotta touch on things that are gonna be neutral and can be bipartisan, agreed upon. That this makes a lot of sense. Not so much as defunding the police, but what about mandatory body cams or something like that, right? What are some of the pieces from the George Floyd Policing Act that you can get behind, that you can find some support on the ground? These are things that should matter to her, especially if she's coming from the left.
No, definitely. Those are things you can sort of latch on to, that, should be things that are, like I said, sort of bipartisan, or that you can actually get people interested in. That, there may be some disagreement and, some shift in policy that has to change, but things that overall that people can agree on, that, hey, there needs to be some area of change, or some area of reform. Like I said, that's definitely, in my opinion, something that you could look at. But I still think, to me at this point, I have a hard time seeing her as a viable candidate. And maybe, like I said, maybe she's done, and maybe this is her way of just sort of trying to stay relevant, in my opinion, because I just have a hard time seeing her, being taken seriously politically anymore.
That I agree with, but I also think that she could be viable for a cabinet position in the next administration. I mean, and she's still relatively young. She's 38. She'll be 39 pretty soon. So she's really sharp, right? And so she could play a significant role on, a moderate Republican's ticket, because Joe Manchin and Kyrsten Sinema, how they got into office, we don't really know, and they are completely opposed to everything that the Democrats are doing right now, and they're within the party. So I don't get it, right? If Tulsi Gabbard is not taken seriously, why is Kyrsten Sinema taken seriously, right? Doesn't make a whole lot of sense to me. Kyrsten Sinema, I think the thing with her is her base, my understanding from her election in Arizona, was very much made of progressives. Played a major part. So it's like her voting pattern doesn't really make sense, other than, hey, it's early on in her term, and that, she has time where she can, as it gets further on, she can hopefully, in her mind, probably think that, hey, I can maybe make people forget about some of the votes and things that I ran on, if I support the right things strategically. But hers is sort of a head scratcher, how she's basically voted against her base. Like $15 minimum wage, she voted against, but she literally campaigned on $15 minimum wage. So yeah, some of these don't make sense who are still in the party. Those are my last thoughts. Anything left for you?
No, I just, like I said, it'll be interesting to see, like I said, the fallout from both the AOC situation, like what that does to her brand, and what you could say, what the recent positions of Tulsi, what it does to her brand long term. Obviously AOC has the bigger stature of the two, but sort of two younger people, you could say, in politics, made their way both by kind of being outsiders, both making kind of waves, and honestly, you could say maybe even moving in two different directions politically, as far as where their careers go. Which, with AOC, it may be sort of trying to moderate some of her positions to move a little bit more in the mainstream, and sort of secure an ongoing incumbency as a politician. And someone like Gabby going in the opposite direction, which is sort of changing up some of her positions, but seeming to move a little bit out of the political spotlight and more into the maybe even pundit space, or at least influencer type of space. So it'll be interesting to see.
Like, share, and subscribe. Make sure you follow us on Twitter at brothers_podcast.